what, like 8 hours of an NFL week? Like, this is going well. It's not hard. That's why I like waking up to Josh's strategy shows, because it's like, oh, 6 a.m., there's a fucking run sheet. Let's roll. I can go do whatever until the show starts. Thank you. At this point, I'm not going to be allowed to do any like main shows if I keep going the way I am, pissing people off. So count me in. Well, I'll say I have no idea what you're talking about. That was different, Josh and Adam. My chances of making $1 million in that contest went down when you said that. Spend your normal bankroll. We'll just give you Million Maker tickets. It's like, okay, weird, but I'm in. But I'll take it. All right. We're ready to roll when y'all are.
And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Tuesday, September 6th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are brought to you by PrizePicks. I had to double check there with a look to my left. We got 12 games to talk about. It's a good one. And we are now an hour earlier than we normally are because we are the lead-in to the NFL Strategy Show at 11. The NFL is here. We will be breaking that down every single day now moving forward. So buckle up for that. Before we get started, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, 2 slates yesterday. How'd it work out for you?
Pretty well overall. Didn't or lost money the early slate. Had a lot of Toronto, had a lot of Yankees, didn't have a lot of Gossman, had a lot of Taillon, but made it back plus some on the night slate. Surprisingly, got to a good amount of the Giants, which I didn't expect, but worked out. Got third in the $250 4 max with a 5-man Giant stack, 3-man Angels secondary stack with Suarez and Snell. So yeah, that worked out. And it was one of those, like, I didn't really have a lot of interest in the Giants on shows because I mean, they were facing Heaney. It wasn't a great spot. But then when I actually saw like the lineups that I played and the way they were constructed, it made sense because like you're getting a 50% on Mike Trout, you're getting like a 30% on Shohei Ohtani. I was playing popular pitchers, so wanted to get off the board, needed to get off the board somewhere, and Heaney does offer home run upside. So kind of thought it made sense once I saw what the lineups actually look like.
Yeah, I had a bit more Giants last night than I thought I was going to. I think they ended up being my 4th most exposed team, which was not something that I thought would happen when I originally went through the slate.
Yeah, it was similar for me. Like I
helped.
pretty much jammed the Angels and then had like the Dodgers, the Giants, and I think the Padres as like my 2 through 4, but they were all really close.
Gotcha. Well, we have a hard out at just shy of 11 o'clock. We've got 12 games to get through today. So I think we just sort of need to dive in if we can.
Yeah.
No, not much of a choice here. Let me double check, see if anything. Nope. All righty, here we go. Orioles and Blue Jays. 4.2 run implied total for the Orioles, 4.3 for the Blue Jays. Kyle Bradish and Mitch White going in this one. Bradish, 6,800. Mitch White, 6,300. Do you prefer one of these guys more? Do you have any interest in either of them as pay down options?
Not really. I mean, it's a really difficult matchup for Bradish. He has been pitching well recently. Really all season long, he's been fine. And he's been pitching even better since coming back from the injured list, throwing a lot more first pitch strikes, getting ahead in counts. That makes his stuff play better, but still certainly a difficult matchup. 12 game slate, 22% strikeout percentage, 3.98 xFIP overall this season, but probably not a spot that I'm really going to be looking to target him, against Toronto. And then on the other side with Mitch White, kind of similar, $6,300 price tag, but relatively difficult matchup against the Orioles. He hasn't been a great strikeout pitcher this year, only striking out 18% of hitters. So not much interest in the pitching.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like a spot where I'm going to be getting all that much. I've got a couple other options as pay downs that I think will work just as well. One, in fact, that I'm not excited to talk about, but we'll get there. Let's talk bats, though. That's generally going to be easier. I'm going to hit you with the Blue Jays first. They came in 6th in my top stack rankings. Not exactly great values because everybody's expensive at the top. Blue Jays have pricing. Like, the Blue Jays pricing is what Coors pricing should always look like, and it just never does. We'll get to that in a bit, too. How do you feel about the Blue Jays against Bradish?
I like the upside here. Bradish has had issues with right-handed power this year. He's allowed, that's the wrong day. He's allowed a 202 expected ISO to righties, only a 21.1% strikeout percentage. Like I said before, if he continues to work ahead in counts like he's been able to since coming back from the injured list, he's probably going to have more success going forward against righties because he can use his slider more effectively and get swings and misses. But, obviously we're only talking about a handful of starts at this point, and there's no real reason to think that there was some massive change where now he's going to throw more strikes. And so if he is working behind the counts and everything, then there is a ton of upside here. Obviously, you also have the deeper wall in left field, and you have a lot of right-handed bats on the Blue Jays, so that isn't ideal either. But overall, still a very high upside spot for Toronto.
Yeah, I assume that I'm going to get to a little bit here just because I see some options for value from a pitching side. I mean, the top of pitching is loaded, but I think there's a couple options for value that will allow it to be a little bit easier to get to the Blue Jays. But at the same time, 4.3 run implied total, Bradish isn't bad. Like it's also possible. I'm curious to see the Blue Jays ownership because if they're unowned, I have a little bit more interest just because of the upside. If they're just like moderately owned, like I had them at just under 5% chance of being the top stack. If that's where their aggregate ownership is, they're probably not going to be much of a priority for me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Also, just given the expensive price tags. I also wanted to see, because they did play a doubleheader yesterday, and the Orioles pitching ended up being kind of wonky because Jordan Lyles was supposed to pitch the first game. They pushed him back to the second game because he was sick. By the time the second game rolled around, he was still sick, so he didn't pitch at all. So you ended up using the bullpen a little bit more than they planned. So the one thing that did work out sort of in their favor, I mean, it didn't work out because they got destroyed, but Bruce Zimmerman ended up throwing 92 pitches out of the bullpen, so that did save them a little bit. But you do have a bullpen that had to work at least somewhat yesterday. Brian Baker, DL Hall, Joey Crable, Bo Sulser, Nick Vespi all pitched yesterday. They managed to avoid using Perez or Tate, two of their better relievers, and Bautista obviously didn't pitch in those games. So the bullpen's not depleted by any stretch, but they are a little bit just worn out too.
How do you feel about your Orioles on the opposite side?
I like them, but again, it depends on ownership. It's not a spot that I'm looking at it and saying, oh, they look great. They have like a 4.3 implied run total. Mullins, Rutschman, Santander are all expensive. Everybody else is pretty cheap. DraftKings finally gave Gunnar Henderson multi-position eligibility, second base, third base. So that's pretty useful. He's only $3,300, has the platoon advantage against White. That looks good. I expect that he will be popular. Probably a cash option at one of those two positions as well. White has done a pretty good job limiting power this year. 108 expected ISO to lefties, 145 to righties. But if the Orioles aren't getting much ownership, I'm still interested just because, the three guys at the top are obviously good. Rutschman's always a top catcher option. And then Mountcastle, Henderson, Hayes, Stowers, if he's in the lineup at 2K. These guys all give you plenty of power upside for pretty cheap price tags.
Anything else here? Orioles or Jays?
Nope.
Yankees and Twins. 4-run implied total for the Yankees. 2.8 for the Twins. There are a lot of really low implied totals today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams at 3.3 or below. It is just, there's a lot of pitching out there. There's a lot of low run totals. Garrett Cole on the hill for the Yanks. Joe Ryan on the hill for the Twins. I don't get the sense we're going to be talking too much about Joe Ryan. Perfectly acceptable pitcher, but 8,300 against the Yankees feels like a tough sell, although run total looks pretty good. Yankees on the other hand, or Garrett Cole on the other hand, 11,200. He is the most expensive pitcher on today's slate by $600 north of Shane Bieber. I have him as the highest projected pitcher, but I don't really love the spot for Cole if we're just judging the spot itself. Do you think you're going to get all the way up to Cole?
So right now we have him projected to be the highest scoring pitcher on DraftKings by about 3 DraftKings points. So there's a decent chance, but also he's really expensive at 11-2. That's a price tag we haven't really seen all that often. And also, I guess worth mentioning now, not that you need to worry about it at this point. This game does look like it has the biggest weather concerns on the slate as well. So be sure to pay attention to it. And there's a non-zero chance we end up just losing this game. But it's kind of just a situation where I think that there is plenty of pitching on this slate. So paying $11,200 for Cole isn't going to be a massive priority in the sense where I'm just putting him in first and, building lineups around them. I don't think it's one of those slates where you just have a huge drop from Garrett Cole to every other pitcher. It's not like a Spencer Strider against Colorado type slate where he was priority number 1, but still certainly happy to get to Cole. He projects very well. He's got the highest strikeout percentage on the slate as well.
Yeah, I assume I get there. I get there every single slate. I don't think today will be any different, really, but ownership will tell that story because I think Cole, Bieber, Valdez, Wright, Musgrove are all sort of on a different level as these pay up options. Whichever one or two of those is going to get the giant ownership discount is likely going to be the guy that I'm heavier on. So we'll see what that ends up being. Let's talk about the Yankees. Actually, do you have any interest in Joe Ryan here? 8,300 just feels like way too difficult of a spot on a 12 gamer.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to get to. The case, I think, would be that you're going to get a predominantly right-handed Yankees lineup, and Joe Ryan has been pretty much lights out against righties this year, striking out 30.5%, 204 actual ISO, 153 expected ISO, so he's been a bit unlucky there. But that strikeout percentage, I don't think you can totally ignore. But again, there's just so many pitchers on this slate that I think it's going to be pretty difficult to get a lot of the one facing the Yankees.
Can't say I disagree there. Don't expect to be getting to too much here from a bats perspective, like a 4-run implied total for it's really crazy how negated the offenses are for the Blue Jays and the Yankees today from an implied total. I have the Yankees 10th in top stack at 4%. Joe Ryan, not exactly somebody that I'm trying to target against. I love the park for power, but I don't really see it here. So I don't expect to get to much of the Yankees. This is also a very different Yankees lineup. Judge is 6,400. The next most expensive guy that I have in the projected lineup is 4,300. So cheaper than they normally are, but probably not a priority for me.
Yeah, and that can all also be offset. I mean, if you tell me the Yankees are 1% owned, then obviously I feel differently. But assuming the ownership is around where it should be, there's nothing that I'm looking at and saying, I think this is a great spot or anything. I mentioned that Ryan's been kind of unlucky in terms of power allowed to righties so far. 153 expected ISO. It's not like he's not giving up any, but he has been pretty unlucky so far. Aaron Judge goes without saying you can play. But outside of that, unless they're just not getting any ownership, I have a hard time wanting to get to the Yankees.
Similarly, I have no interest in the Twins against Cole.
Yeah, same boat. 184 expected ISO to lefties, and you do have the Twins in Yankee Stadium, but then you look at the left-handed options. I like Nick Gordon, kind of. Multi-position eligible, 2,400. Hits the ball hard constantly. Max Kepler, though, he was scratched yesterday. He's sort of been a shell of himself anyway. Luis Ariz puts the ball in play, but doesn't have a lot of power. If I had to single out one guy from the Twins, I think it's Nick Gordon.
All righty. Cubs and Reds. 4.2 run implied total for the Cubbies, 3.3 for the Reds. Wade Miley and Justin Dunn. I honestly, I don't even think I knew that Wade Miley was in the league. 6,100 for Wade Miley, 5,800 for Justin Dunn. No interest in either guy. The Reds suck, and it's a great strikeout matchup, and I still don't think it's possible to get to Miley.
Yeah, I think if I were to go to one side, it would be Miley, but that's still not any sort of an actual priority here. We have him projected for almost 14 DraftKings points at 6,100, so it looks like a decent value. We have Dunn actually in that same range as well, but I think it's more likely that I just get to a couple of better pitchers.
I think that I agree with you there. We might be a little high on Miley. I don't know how deep he's going to go into this game. He did go 5 innings on the 16th, but then didn't pitch again for 2 weeks, went 3 2/3, faced 16 batters. I just don't know how live he is to be deep pitching way into this game, but I also think that he shouldn't be in the league at all. So there's a completely different talking point. I do think that I can get to the Cubs bats, though. I have them 5th in top stack plus 2nd in value. I think they're very easy to get to. Maybe too many outfielders in the lineup itself, no positional flexibility from an MPE, but I'm not all that worried about Justin Dunn, who has a 5.53 projected FIP via Steamer. So I think everybody looks good by default.
Yeah, for Dunn since the beginning of last year, to get a little bit larger sample, 249 expected ISO to lefties, 191 to righties. There are strikeouts in the Cubs lineup, but there is also power. It does look like the wind is blowing in here, and it's only supposed to be around 70 degrees, so that hurts a bit. But 4,100 for Suzuki, 3,800 for Happ looks fantastic. 2,600 for Reyes. I really like all three of those price tags. Nico Horner, $3,500 shortstop option is going to look pretty solid as well. So again, not great hitting conditions, but very favorable matchup.
We got ownership a minute ago. Wait do you see the ownership on Rowdy Tellez? It's so dumb for a 12-game slate. Just truly.
But and it's like fine is the thing.
It's correct. It's not even outlandish.
Yeah, I mean, he probably is optimal 25% of the time or something. I haven't run anything. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty big number. That's for sure. No I can't disagree with you there. Let me see. I'm grabbing the rest of our tools quickly. They just got put up now. Just got to grab top pitchers, and then we're back in business. Ooh, Garrett Cole at the top. Who could have seen that coming? Interesting. So Cubbies are pulling some ownership. They are second at 12%. I am massively under that number right now. I think I understand why they look like they do, but I'm always going to be, and I have I grade them out much better than we do, and I'm still not getting to them. I think there's just going to be better options for value.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say was I think I'm likely to be higher on them than we are because I think we're higher on Justin Dunn than I am, which obviously has a relationship. Yeah. But that's a really big gap. And I understand that there is value here, but 12% ownership, 4% chance of being the top stack, even if I come in around 6-7%, it's probably going to be sort of difficult to get to them individually. they aren't. It's not really one guy pulling it up. You have all of Contreras, Horner, Reyes, Happ, Ortega, Madrigal getting 11+% ownership. I do like Seiya Suzuki at only 8%. I still like Franmil Reyes at 13%. I like Happ at 14%. I think it's a team where maybe I get to the more as like 2-mans and 3-mans, just trying to grab a few home runs.
Okay.
Makes it a little bit easier
side
to balance out the ownership that way.
Yeah. Are you getting to the Reds? It's an alternative value stack, at least.
Yeah, I mean, there is value there. I don't really know where I would want to go.
Nowhere, I think, is the answer. Because they're piss poor and their implied total is, 2 runs lower than a lot of teams on the slate. So just going to go ahead and skip these idiots. Anything else?
Nope.
Alrighty, 3 games up, still 9 to go. Schedule for the rest of the day. I previewed this right out of the gate, but a reminder, 11 p.m. Yeah, I put it in as 11 p.m. Yeah, don't tune in at 11 p.m. That show won't be going on. 11 a.m. NFL strategy show, first look. Laffy and Ben taking a lap through NFL Sunday, week 1. Make sure you're tuning in. NFL is back. We got a Drafters live show at 12:30 with Nick Lepre. Adam and I are back at 4:45 for the deeper dive. And then we've got MLB live before lock at 6. Free content for today. We're going to talk about it the entire show. MLB top stacks free for you guys. Head to stokastic.com to check it out. And hit that like button. 140 something people. People weren't ready for the time change. So if you're here, support us with those thumbs up so everybody knows where to be each morning, because this is going to be the new start time now that football is here. Cardinals and Nats, 4.8 run implied total for the Cards, 3.1 for the Nats. Jose Quintana and Paolo Espino. Quintana getting a little bit of love, 7,500. He is 9% owned. That's what's going to happen when you face the Nats or the Tigers or the Reds. You just sort of, as long as you're functional, you're going to look decent. That's about where I think Quintana should be. And I do not want Paolo Espino.
Yeah, same boat. The Nats aren't a great strikeout matchup. They do have a lot of right-handed hitters. Quintana's only struck out 19.5% of righties this year compared to 35% of lefties. 166 expected ISO to righties. He's fine at 7,500. Espino on the other side, really difficult spot for him. Not a very good strikeout pitcher, not a very good pitcher in general. Has had plenty of issues with right-handed power in particular throughout his career. And now you get this Cardinals team that has O'Neill, Goldschmidt, Arenado, Pujols if he's in the lineup. So not a spot that I'm interested in. I do expect to get to some Quintana just because that price tag's reasonable and he's a good enough pitcher.
I wanted to just circle back quickly. We have the Yankees as essentially unowned. You mentioned 1% before. They are 1%. I am getting to a ton of the Yankees.
Yeah, if they're going to be 1%, I think I probably get there.
Okay. Let's talk Cardinals bats, obviously. 7th in our top stack tool, 5th in ownership. Those numbers are basically the same. They're actually 3rd in my top stack tool, but the top stack percentage is identical. So no real change there. It's just bunched up at the top. I am getting to the Cardinals a bit. I'm very happy to do so. Only Nootbaar and Donovan are over 5% owned. Goldschmidt is essentially on that number, but he is 6,200. I'm getting to about 8% Cardinals right now, a little bit more from a stack perspective, and that works for me.
Yeah, I like the Cardinals. They give you a pretty nice balance of power upside and value. Goldschmidt, Arenado, O'Neill are all expensive, but they all also have tons of power from the right side. So far this season, Espino has allowed a 214 expected ISO to righties. Since last year, it's at 225. So those 3 guys all look really good. And then you get guys like, maybe Albert Pujols, who's always cheap. But, if not, Corey Dickerson, 2,400, left-handed, but has some power. And it's not like Espino is great against lefties either. He's allowed a 163 expected ISO to them this year. You're probably going to have a cheap Nootbaar leading off. Brendan Donovan could be in the lineup with multi-position eligibility and a cheap price tag. Nolan Gorman's got power at second base. It's just a really solid lineup, I think, in terms of being able to get some discounted bats and also some big-time power upside.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. I think we're looking more simpatico today than we were yesterday. Yeah, Dickerson is the guy that I'm getting to the most. $2,400 outfielder is going to do it. I am not getting to the Nats, 5th in top value, 15th in ownership. I just don't need it. I'm
not kind of interested in the Nats.
Go for it.
Just because they're so cheap and they do have right-handed power here. Quintana, again, he's not a bad pitcher, but only a 140 expected ISO to righties this year. But I don't know, $2,800 Luke Voit seems appealing. $2,300 Lane Thomas. I assume he's going to be leading off. Joey Meneses is expensive, but I don't know. It's not really a spot where I like full stacks, but I do kind of just like the Lane Thomas, Luke Voit pieces at those price tags.
Fair enough. Anything else?
Nope.
Astros and Rangers. 4.6 run implied total for the Stros, 2.8 for the Rangers. Framber Valdez and Glenn Otto. Otto 6,600 and unowned against the Astros. Shouldn't be all that surprising to you. Framber Valdez, $10K. He's the third most expensive pitcher on today's slate. $1,100 or $1,200 behind Garrett Cole. He's projected for 33% ownership. He is the second highest owned pitcher on the slate behind Cole. And I think that ownership is warranted. I think the Rangers lineup is probably a little bit better than most people think, but it is a decent strikeout matchup. I will be getting to Framber Valdez.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a solid pitcher here. The one thing I will say is I think he's getting a little bit too much ownership given the relative lack of strikeouts that he gets. 22.6% strikeout percentage is like, I don't know exactly who's on the slate game-wise, but out of starting pitchers today, he's 9th in strikeout percentage. So it's just, that's kind of a lot of ownership when you look at the pitchers around him, like Shane Bieber, $600 more, getting less ownership. Musgrove getting less ownership. Kyle Wright getting like 1/3 the ownership against Oakland. But Valdez is still a really good pitcher. Average-ish strikeout stuff, but extremely, extremely good at limiting power. 3.14 xFIP this year, half a home run per 9 innings. Average launch angle to both lefties and righties this season is negative. Negative 5.7 degree launch angle to lefties, negative 3.3 degrees to righties. 103 expected ISO to righties, 0.059 expected ISO to lefties. So I do expect him to pitch well, have a good game. I'm just a little bit concerned by the fact that he's getting 33% ownership and not a great strikeout pitcher.
Yeah, where he lacks in strikeouts, he makes up in depth for this game. I've got him projected for 6 2/3. That's, I would imagine, the most outs that I gave to any pitcher. No one's getting much higher than that. I mean, he's in the Alcantara boat at this point. Like he's going pretty deep, pretty regularly. That, I think, is the appeal. I got to 27%. So like I'm going to be in and around that number. It's hard for me to want to get away entirely, but there are.
And to clarify for me, like I do like Valdez. The only negative I had to point to was kind of just that he is getting more ownership than those guys, but he does also project better than those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting top 5 today. Fun to break down. We'll hash that out once we get through every team.
Yeah. It's one of those where like, a lot's just going to depend on what offenses I get to, what my lineups end up looking like as a whole. I'm not looking at Framber Valdez and saying like, oh yeah, I need to get away from him. You know, that's one of those things that I typically just try not to do anyway, is look at one player and decide that's like a breaking point. But certainly not looking at that ownership and saying like, oh, I don't know why he's there. Like that seems crazy to me. But it is just a spot that stands out to me where it's just like, all right, well, if I have a lineup where I'm looking to save a little bit of ownership at pitcher because I played, I don't know, let's say the Cubs, then I think you can get away from Valdez and still get guys that have a similar range of outcomes.
Do you like the idea of getting to the Astros here? 8th in top stack, 11th in ownership. I'm not really getting there. I'm just kind of getting to the Yankees over them because they are pulling just slightly more ownership than New York is on the surface.
I do like the Astros more than New York. Like, I don't think that Glenn Otto is on the same page or like in the same league as Joe Ryan. It does also feel like Glenn Otto just pitched, but I assume he didn't. But he's not been very good this year. He was pretty highly regarded as a prospect, hasn't really lived up to it so far. 166 expected ISO to righties, 192 to lefties, striking out less than 19% of hitters from either side of the plate. Tons of right-handed power here in Houston for the Astros. Then you have the two great lefties with Alvarez and Tucker. So I do like the Astros. And as long as the ownership stays relatively low like it is right now at 3%, I think I end up getting there.
Okay. Let's talk Rangers, and I think we're done. Do you like anything from Texas?
No.
Okay.
Not unless you like ground balls.
I don't think we get extra points for those. No. Royals and Guardians, 3.1 run implied total for the Royals, 4.3 for the Guardians. Chris Bubich going for Kansas City. Shane Bieber going for Cleveland. No ownership going to Bubich, but I assume we're projecting it low because they don't know you're playing today. Shane Bieber, on the other hand, 10,600, second most expensive pitcher on the slate, 25% owned. I've got a much bigger stand on Bieber than the field does. I'm not surprised by that. I generally do. I like this as a strikeout matchup as well. So if this ownership holds, and I expect it to wiggle around a lot at the top, but right now I like Bieber quite a bit.
Yeah, so do I. Just not a great Kansas City lineup. I mean, there is still talent there. We talk about it all the time, normally because I'm playing them. But Melendez, Witt, Perez, Prado, those guys all have talent. Michael Massey projects to be about a league average hitter. Everybody else doesn't look very good. Michael A. Taylor is having the best year he's had in a really long time, but he's still striking out like 25.5% of the time, which I believe is a career low for him. But that's still a pretty solid strikeout percentage. The bottom of the order is pretty weak, and Shane Bieber is just a really good pitcher as well. Doesn't throw as hard as he used to, but still striking out around 26% of hitters, sub 3 xFIP, about 0.8 home runs per 9 innings. Looks like a good spot for him. Probably gets a little bit less ownership than Valdez just because he's a little bit more expensive, but I don't think there's a big difference between those two.
Yeah, I've got Bieber at 21.9. I've got Valdez at 21.1. I think Bieber just has like a naturally higher ceiling than Valdez, but very similar from a projection standpoint, particularly when you start factoring in the salary as well.
We have Valdez
Bubic?
by about a point.
Oh, really? Okay. Bubic?
I don't think so. I mean, he's 6K, but really difficult strikeout matchup. Not a very good pitcher. I don't think this is the type of slate where I need to get to him. I certainly hope it's not.
I can't wait.
I hate slate so much. I didn't get to him last slate. I was really excited about that.
6th in top stack, 3rd in ownership at this moment, and it's not just Jose Ramirez. Guardians pulling a lot of ownership there, almost 8%, and we haven't talked about the Coors game, which is about to come. I am not getting to Cleveland right now. 4.3 run implied total. Like I think they're getting this ownership because they're a good combination of top stack and top value. This is just going to be one of those spots that I'm not getting to, but I understand the appeal. But I hate getting anybody in Kansas City just because it's a place where home runs don't happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think Cleveland looks fine. One thing that I think is interesting is going to be what lineup do the Guardians go with? Because it's a small sample this year, but Bubic has been absolutely awful. Like, unbelievably bad against left-handed hitters. He's been fine, not good, but better against righties. 19.3% strikeout percentage against righties, 164 expected ISO, 348 expected WOBA on 1,428 pitches thrown. About 400 pitches to lefties, so much smaller sample, but 252 expected ISO, 450 expected WOBA, 11.5% strikeout percentage. If you go back to last year, 221 expected ISO, 391 expected WOBA. I don't know. Typically reverse splits don't last, and I don't really have a reason for them here other than he does throw his changeup 30% of the time to righties, but it doesn't appear to be that good of a pitch, so I don't know that it's that. But I'm just interested to see what lineup the Guardians run out there. At the very least, if you are going to Cleveland, I wouldn't shy away from whatever lefties are in there, whether it's Kwan, Jimenez, or others. Obviously, that's not saying not to play Rosario, Gonzalez, Ramirez. They're all going to look good as well. But I am just kind of curious to see what Cleveland does with their lineup here.
I don't really see the Royals as a possible stack. 2nd worst in top stack, 12th in value, not owned, which I guess is appealing for like their first 4 bats in their lineup, but I don't need anything from a stack perspective against Bieber. Yeah,
kind of like Bubic. I hope I don't get here. It typically happens, but I don't really have a reason to. Bieber hasn't given up much power this year, around a 130 ISO to both sides of the plate. Anytime you get Melendez, Witt, Perez, Prado at low ownership, it's got a high ceiling, but with 24 pitchers to choose from, I don't think I need to be taking bats against Shane Bieber.
There it is. PrizePicks, presenting sponsor of this show. It's a good time to sign up at PrizePicks. If you click the link in the description of this video, you can get a $100 instant match deposit bonus, but it only works if you put in 100. If you put in 50, they're only going to give you 50. You don't have to worry about optimizers. Fantasy Cruncher is not going to be relevant for you in this particular case because you're basically picking player props, over-unders, and you're trying to build a parlay card. If you can hit 5 correct bets, you will get up to 10x your entry fee. I think that sounds pretty good. I'm going to hit Adam with a couple props here for pitcher fantasy score, but there are so many different sports that you can even combine here, whether that's F1, MMA, tennis. soccer, highlight, disc golf. There's all sorts of crazy stuff in addition to your standard issue sports. So we're going to start pitcher fantasy score. First guy on the list, Shane Bieber, 42.5.
Under.
Yeah, me too. I got him at 38.5. Just that's not the one that's going to get it done. Let's see who else would be a. Let's take a look at this one. Mitch White, 18.5.
We have him at 23.7, so I would take the over.
Yeah, I got him at 22 too, so I think I'm taking the over as well. I don't think that's going to stay at 18.5 much longer. One other guy at 18.5. Not that we should be ever talking about him, but Glenn Otto. I have him well below that number.
We have him at 21.4.
Okay. Really? Interesting. I figured out why I have Glenn Otto at that number, by the way.
Not enough innings?
Yeah, I accidentally typed 5 instead of 15 outs. So I think if he's going 1 2/3, it's not going to be the one that gets it done. So now I have Glenn Otto projected for 18.4. So right on the number. I looked at it and it was just like, that doesn't seem correct.
What did you have, like 10?
Like 7-4 or something. Ultimately, it doesn't like change anything from a lineup construction perspective because no matter how many innings I give Glenn Otto, he's not going to look good. But
right, yeah.
I know
Otto,
that
18 inning shutout or 18 inning complete game doesn't matter.
Yeah, when I looked at it and I was just like 87.5, like I'm gonna just deposit right now, get this line when I can. All righty, go sign up at PrizePicks, everybody. Presenting sponsor, happy to have them. Happy to have them sponsoring the strategy show each morning. And now we get to do it again. The most irritating game on the slate. The Colorado Rockies, the Milwaukee Brewers, 4.7 run implied total for the Rockies, 6.2 for the Brewers. Chad Kuhl and Brandon Woodruff. This is where things get interesting. Chad Kuhl, don't play him at all. If you do, you're not making the right decisions. Brandon Woodruff, on the other hand, 9,400, 2% owned. I want to get more Brandon Woodruff than that because he's good. What do you make of that for this one? Because it's not like the Rockies are just inherently good either.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting spot to get to in tournaments because he is so low owned and he is good, like you said. Second highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Cole at 28.7%, 3.4 xFIP. We still have him projected 3 points behind Musgrove, 4 points behind Bieber, 5 points behind Valdez, 8 points behind Cole. There's still a big enough gap there that I think it's going to be difficult for me to get much, but there is a really high ceiling. Like he is a really, really good pitcher, and it is, it's the worst park you can pitch in, but it's still just, it's still a park. Like if he's striking guys out, he's striking guys out. Obviously pitches move less and differently in cores. Colorado as a team, their active roster has around a 100 WRC plus with like a 180 ISO at home this year, compared to like overall, they're on the road. They're at like 78 WRC plus. I mean, obviously a huge difference. So, as bad a spot as it can get for Woodruff in terms of park, and this is probably the lowest he's projected all season, but still a really high ceiling for a guy getting 2% ownership.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued. I have 8% right now. I'm really curious to see what I end up with towards the end of the day.
I think something like that makes sense. Like I could see maybe getting there. I don't think it's a spot where, like, this is the kind of spot where back in 2018 when I was like just hand building lineups and probably playing more contrarian than I should, I would just be like playing so much Brandon Woodruff, and then one of two things would happen. One, he pitches like he's in Coors Field and I lose, or two, he pitches well, but then he still just loses to like Shane Bieber or Framber Valdez or Garrett Cole. And it's like, oh, I was smart for playing 2% Brandon Woodruff, but I got unlucky because Garrett Cole pitched well. Like, no,
right.
Still, so it's still, there's a lot of ways where it's not going to work out, but we have him with an 8% chance of being top 2%, 2% ownership. I think if you get in that like 8 to 10% range, it makes sense. It's not somebody that I would ever anticipate, being like, oh, my biggest stand on the slate today is I played 38% Brandon Woodruff or something.
And now we talk about the bats. We'll start on the Brewers side because that's the team I'm getting less of. They are 23% likely to be the top stack, 33% owned today. They're second in top value. I don't have their value the same. I have their value so staggeringly, like I'm in a different ballpark value. We have it at 14%. I have it at 5%. They are 8th in top value for me. I am well under the field. I have 11% in the aggregate. I actually don't hate that. That's sort of enough for me at this point. Half of their lineup is getting 30+% ownership. This isn't one of those spots where I just want to be like, this is the most owned team on a 12-game slate, so I'm fading it. But I'm more likely to get to a lot more Rockies who, at this moment in time, we have single-digit owned across the board.
Yeah, so whenever we get these cores pricing games, I never really know exactly where I'm going to end up because I think you can kind of just like take a couple of different approaches where, you know, you play a lot of Milwaukee, you play more of the like Brandon Woodruff type, Joe Ryan type pitchers that have upside but are low owned. You play Scherer and secondary stacks with them. But typically frequently what ends up happening for me is if you look at my actual player exposures, I will be higher on Milwaukee than anybody else, but I still like won't get to the field. Like if Rowdy Tellez, we haven't projected for 40%, let's call it 30 because that's what typically happens. If he's 30%, maybe I have like 20% and he's my highest owned first baseman, but I still end up not getting to the field.
I have 19 right now. And like, to me, that's, I'm happy with the numbers that I see.
Yeah. And the reason it kind of ends up working out that way, it's not that I'm going in and saying, you know, oh, well, I want to be under the field, but not fade these guys. Like I'm not taking that sort of approach. It's just when I'm building lineups and then figuring out which lineups to play, it just kind of works out where there are enough combinations of like low owned stacks where I can fit in Rowdy Tellez or fit in Christian Yelich or whoever, you know, Milwaukee guys to round it out and still be low enough owned that it just gets me to around 15-20%. But then I start running out of ways to do it. And then it starts being like, okay, well, in these lineups, I just don't have Milwaukee. So because they do project so well and they are so cheap, I typically get them as some of my highest owned players. It's just that I don't get that much of them.
Are you surprised to see the ownership on the Colorado side?
Not really.
They are fifth in top stack, 11th in ownership at 2.9%.
Yeah, I mean, they're relatively expensive for a matchup against Woodruff. You know, nobody in the projected lineup is over 5K, but McMahon 4,800, Rogers 46, Crone 49, Blackman 46 against Brandon Woodruff. I get why the ownership is low. It doesn't mean I don't want to go there. I think that 2% ownership going to the Rockies in cores is going to be pretty appealing. Like you're getting all of the same benefits as the 30% owned Milwaukee team, and it's a big difference, but the only difference is you're facing Brandon Woodruff instead of Chad Kuhl. Obviously, that's a difference, but all the other reasons that everybody likes Milwaukee, well, actually, so I guess the other reason everybody likes Milwaukee is they're way cheaper than the Rockies. But just from like a baseball standpoint, the only difference here is the pitcher, which again, it's a difference. But other than that, you know, you just kind of have to figure out how to make the pricing work. But it's not like Colorado is that expensive. Like once you get past those top four guys, Grichuk 4,100 if he's in the lineup, Toglia 2,700. You know, you can make it work.
I'm gonna be miles over a 3% owned Rockies team today. Doesn't make me feel great with Woodruff on the opposite side, but this is just a spot that I find it to be pretty easy to get over the field, especially if the lineup holds the way that it is. Third base, second base, first base, 1, 2, 3 is going to make it a lot easier to stack this team up. You get someone like Toglia with MPE at 2,700 in cores, 1.9% owned. Like I'm just going to be getting to some of these guys pretty aggressively. So sign me up for cores, but I want more of Colorado than I do of the Brewers in large field contests. Maybe not want, but will get.
Did you say you'll get to more of the Rockies?
I have more of the Rockies right now.
I would be shocked if I get more Colorado than Milwaukee. I think it's likely that I end up getting more relative to the field, like getting over the field on Colorado and under on Milwaukee. I think is reasonable. I'd be very surprised if I get actual more ownership going to the Rockies.
There's per steamer, there's a ton of power in this Rockies lineup. I know what face you're going to make when I say this out loud. They are essentially tied for the highest ISO on the slate.
They have like a 180 something ISO at home this year.
189 for the Jays, 192 for the Dodgers, 190 for the Braves, 190 for the Colorado Rockies. I'm gonna take my shot there on buying power for nothing.
Yeah, and no, I mean I don't disagree with that because that's pretty much what they've done at home all year. But then I mean McMahon, Rogers, Crone, Blackman, Grichuk, those guys can all hit. Toglia looks like he has some power.
224 projected ISO.
What'd you say? 224?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope he has some power. Elias Diaz in the projected lineup that I have is the low man at 158, and that's not even like low. So we'll see what that lineup ends up looking like, but I'm going to be taking a stand on the Colorado Rockies, and I will be happy to get some sort of like half the field type play on the Brewers. That's where I expect to end up. Just change the pricing, DraftKings, please. This makes this slate worse. Angels and Tigers, 4.4 run implied total for the Angels, 3.7 for the Tigers. Mike Mayers going for the Angels. Eduardo Rodriguez going for the Tigers. Myers is 21% owned at 4,800 today, up against the lowly Tigers. He is the preferred paydown option by a mile because at 4,800, it doesn't really matter so long as you can go deep. The value is there. Do you like it?
I don't know why he's 4,800. I don't remember the last time we saw a starting pitcher below 5K this year. I mean, we've gotten some guys at 4K where like they weren't expected to start or whatever.
Yeah.
But he had been like 5K, 5,200. I don't know how he got down to 4,800 taking on the Tigers when he's fully stretched out. I talked about him before. Like, I don't know what to make of him this season because in the past, like he's predominantly been a reliever for his career, but in the past he was really good at getting strikeouts as a reliever. This year he hasn't been, even before he moved to the rotation. Last year in 75 innings pitched, struck out 28.6% of hitters. This year so far in 38 and a third, he's only struck out about 21%. He's given up more power this year. He's allowed 2.6 home runs per 9 so far. He has a 4.75 xFIP compared to 3.8 last year. I don't know what the deal is with him, like why he's pitching worse, but at 4,800, I really don't care. He's facing the Tigers. He's 4,800. The only thing that, like, if Milwaukee were correctly priced, Myers would be getting a ton of ownership. The only thing that I think kind of keeps you away from him at least a little bit is that you probably just don't need to go that cheap all that often. Like you can build really good lineups that have two of the actual good pitchers, but $4,800 is just a ridiculous price.
Yeah, on the surface, I think he looks great. I'm just not finding it all that necessary to go all the way to the bottom. So I've got about 7% right now. And I get it. Like I'm just able to get to more expensive pitchers because if I'm playing a bunch of Colorado and I'm playing a bunch of Milwaukee, even if I am under on Milwaukee, like I'm getting a third of my exposure going to that game. I don't need 4,800 anymore. So I'm running out of places where I would need him to go into a lineup.
Yeah. And I mean, we have him projected as the 12th highest scoring pitcher on DraftKings.
Yeah, I don't think I'm too far behind that. I might even be ahead of that mark. I have him 12th as well.
Yeah.
I got him at 13.7.
Yeah, we have him at 14.4. And so, I mean, there's like a lot of other guys
sense.
In that range, but none of them are 4,800.
Nah, not even close. Oh, no. The next close, like the first guy that I get to, if I'm going by salary, that is ahead of him is $7,500 Quintana. So,
yeah, that's the cheapest guy ahead of him in our projections. If you look slightly behind Myers, like we have him at 14.4. We have Kyle Bradish at 14. We have Wade Miley at 13.9. We have Justin Dunn at 13.4. But those guys, it's like, Bradish, Miley, Dunn, they're all cheap. And so you kind of look at that salary and you're like, oh, well, they're kind of decent point per dollar plays. And then it's like, oh, wait, I can just save another $1,400 and get an
a
extra
better projected guy. Point. Yeah, it's a no-brainer there. Do you like Erod at all on the opposite side?
I really don't know what to make of him, honestly. The Angels lineups recently have not been as favorable from a strikeout standpoint. You have David Fletcher leading off. He's tough to strike out. Matt Duffy's been in the lineup a lot. He's tough to strike out. Trout and Ohtani obviously are really, really good hitters. So it's not the free strikeout matchup it has been in the past. Rodriguez was really unlucky last season. He missed a lot of this year with personal issues. He struggled last time out. I don't want to read too much into that, but overall this year he's just really struggled. So I don't really know what to make of him because he has a 19.5% strikeout percentage and a 4.7 xFIP this year. But again, he did miss a lot of times. You're talking about a relatively small sample for him, and you do have a long track record of him being a quality pitcher in his career. And then even last year, underlying numbers wise was good. So I don't think the fact that he had myocarditis in 2020 is a huge concern at this point based on what he was able to do last year. But 11 starts this year, 54 innings, only a 19.5% strikeout percentage, 24% career strikeout percentage, 27.5% last year. I'm kind of just at a point where it's not like you shouldn't be shocked if Eduardo Rodriguez goes out there and has a good start because that's been who he is for most of his career. But I also just don't think I really need to mess with it too much on this slate because you have Mike Myers for $2,300 less, and then you have so many pitchers ahead of Rodriguez that just look better.
I didn't expect to say this today, but 12th in top stack, your number one value stack, and 4th in ownership. That would be the Tigers in this game. And I'm actually getting to more of the Tigers. This is another spot where I'm finding value. And I actually like it if Myers is pulling 20% ownership. Do I think he's a good option today? Yeah, of course. But I like the idea of getting on the opposite side of his ownership a little bit. And this is a spot where I can pay down a little bit more, get to more of the pay up option arms. So I don't want to say that I like the Tigers, but I am getting the Tigers.
Yeah, and it goes back to, well, one, it just goes back to them being cheap. But two, if Mike Myers just isn't good anymore for whatever reason, then they look pretty good. I mean, he's allowed a 191 expected ISO to righties, 238 to lefties this year. They're hitting in Anaheim, which, as I recently learned, is a good place to hit. Riley Green, 3,500. Kerry Carpenter, 2,600. Both of those guys have plenty of power. 2K Spencer Torkelson's back. He's been awful this year, but he serves as a nice trap in DFS. You can just keep telling yourself that he's going to figure out how to hit at 2K. Harold Castro, 2,100 at the same position is kind of annoying, but Baez, 4,100. If Reyes is back to hitting second at 2,500, it's just a cheap stack against a pitcher that I don't know what to make of him.
I don't have a ton of interest in the Angels on the opposite side. They're 6th in ownership at 4%. That's about where I am. Trout, Ohtani work. Not a priority for me.
Yeah, I think they're fine. Trout and Ohtani obviously are always going to be good plays. Rodriguez has never been dominant against lefties in terms of, at least in terms of limiting power. Like if you go back to last year, he has a 30% strikeout percentage against them, but he's allowed a 186 expected ISO. If you go back to the start of 2019, 28% strikeout percentage, 172 expected ISO to lefties. The only reason I'm mentioning that is because you shouldn't be shying away from Ohtani here. Trout obviously looks great. Taylor Ward's cheap. Joe Adell is really cheap with some power. Renjifo's been hitting really well. Has multi-position eligibility. So I think they should get some ownership. And like you said, they are. They're projected for about 4% ownership. That seems fine to me.
Next game up, Padres and Diamondbacks. 4-run implied total for the Pods, 3.1 for the Diamondbacks. I think we'll zip through this one. Joe Musgrove and Merrill Kelly, both guys in the 9s from a salary perspective. Kelly getting no ownership, no surprise there. Musgrove, 23% owned. Seems about right to me. I have a little bit. I thought I'd actually get a little bit more just because of where he is, but right around the field works for me. Musgrove's good or good enough. I don't have much to say there. 22% seems about right.
Yeah, I agree. I mentioned it yesterday with Snell before he went out there and struck out a million guys, but this Diamondbacks lineup is a little bit difficult to strike out. There's just not a lot of strikeouts in it. Corbin Carroll, I assume, is going to be in the lineup today against the righty as well. That's a very, very highly regarded prospect, one of the best in baseball, offers power, offers speed. This Diamondbacks lineup is not a cakewalk for guys. They're tough to strike out. They do have power, but Joe Musgrove's still a good pitcher. He's 9,500, which is a reasonable price tag. I think 23% ownership just sort of makes sense. I don't expect to be getting tons more than that or anything, but looks like a good option.
Padres are 15th in top stack, 16th in ownership. Diamondbacks are 19th and 23rd. I am not getting to either side of this. If I got the Padres bats, that's cool, but I expect to have very little hitting here.
Yep, same boat. Merrill Kelly's a solid real-life pitcher. Not really somebody I want to get to in DFS all that much, but 3.79 xFIP, 0.55 home runs per 9. The Padres have enough talent. You can always make the case for getting to them at low ownership, but Brandon Drury is on, I believe, the concussion list, so he's not going to be playing. Soto, Machado, Bell, Cronenworth, those guys are always going to look good, but just enough offenses that look good that aren't facing Merrill Kelly here.
2.9 run implied total for the A's, 4.2 for the Braves, Cole Irvin and Kyle Wright. No one rostering Irvin against the Braves. I think that's fine. Kyle Wright, 13% owned at 9,700. Maybe a little bit more expensive than he should be, but good spot against the A's. Semi-good park in that there's not a lot of runs or home runs, but strikeouts are a little bit more difficult. I like to get to Wright. I'm going to be a little bit over that 12% mark, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, he is the one pay-up option that kind of stands out to me in terms of being surprised he's not getting a little bit more ownership. When you compare him to, Musgrove for $200 less, I don't really think he should be half the ownership. Bieber for $900 more, getting double the ownership as well. I like Kyle Wright there. I mean, he projects behind those guys, but we have him behind Musgrove by like 1.5 points. We have him behind Bieber by, I guess, like almost 3 points. That's a bigger gap. But I do think that 13% ownership on Musgrove against the A's in Oakland, that is a spot where if I'm playing more popular bats, I like to get to.
We have the Braves second in top stack at 6.5%, eighth in ownership. I'm not getting there because I have them at half of that top stack odds. I'm curious that the Braves are second at 6.5 and the Yankees are 18th at 1.8. I get that Joe Ryan is there, but that seems like a really big gap for a team that I think like I have the Yankees ahead of them. So what do you want to do with Atlanta here? It's confusing to me.
I mean, the Yankees implied run total is 0.8 of a point or 0.8 of a run lower. So I'm guessing.
I might have the wrong line for this Oakland. I have it as basically the same. So
no, I'm seeing Braves at 4.6, Yankees at 3.8.
Oh, I have 4.2 and 4, so that's probably the driving factor.
But yeah, I mean, I like the matchup for Atlanta. I don't like the park. Cole Irvin has had pretty substantial issues with right-handed power this year. But the thing you have to keep in mind, so he's allowed a 169 actual ISO to righties, 215 expected ISO. And I mentioned it, I don't remember who he faced last time, but I mentioned liking whoever it was because they had a bunch of right-handed power and it was outside of Oakland. The thing you have to keep in mind is like his 215 expected ISO to righties suggests he's been getting lucky against right-handed hitters. But a big reason for that is that he's pitching a lot of games in Oakland. So he's going to keep getting lucky probably. But you do have enough power in the Atlanta lineup that, they certainly can just do damage anywhere. That, Acuna, Swanson, Riley, d'Arnaud is a strong catcher option, as is Contreras. You have speed at the bottom of the order as well. I do like getting to the Braves. It's just that I would certainly prefer this game be in Atlanta than Oakland.
I do not like getting to the A's, and I won't be.
Nope. Good.
Mariners and White Sox, 3.9 run implied total for the Mariners, 3.2 for the White Sox. Logan Gilbert and Johnny Cueto. Gilbert pulling 10% ownership at 8,500. Cueto pulling no ownership at 8,700. I do prefer Gilbert. I think he's about properly owned. I wouldn't be surprised if I got a little bit of Cueto. I don't have him now, but nothing here is like exciting to me.
Yeah, I'd be kind of surprised if I get more than a nominal amount of Cueto on this slate, just because it's not a great spot against the Mariners. There are plenty of other pitchers. Gilbert at 8,500 makes sense. Strikeout stuff for him hasn't been as good this year as you would hope, but still 22% strikeout percentage, 3.89 xFIP, facing a White Sox team that I don't know. Like, they have names in their lineup, but they haven't really been very good this year. Elvis Andrus absolutely sucks, except for now apparently he's good. He hit Elvis Andrus leading off should be a plus for any opposing pitcher, not necessarily in terms of strikeouts, just in terms of getting easy outs. Hasn't been the case recently, but just the middle of the road White Sox lineup overall. Gilbert's a solid pitcher in a good park.
Mariners, well, let's start with this. Aggressive pitchers park here. Mariners are 13th in top stack, 17th in ownership. White Sox are 15th in top stack, 19th in ownership. I didn't get to either one of these teams with any volume at all. I have very little interest in either team. Even though there is some power on both sides, I'm not going to be getting here.
Yeah, if I got to one, I think it would be Seattle, just because I still think Johnny Cueto is basically smoke and mirrors at this point. But at the same time, he is smoke and mirrors, and guys have trouble hitting him. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but not giving up a lot of power either. Horrible park to hit in. Probably not getting either offense.
Finally, we close it out. Dodgers, 4.7 run implied total. Giants, 3.8. Tyler Anderson and Wei Chi Huang. That's what we're going to go with for right now. Anderson, 8,100, 9% owned. Seems about right. Good strikeout matchup here against the Giants. Huang, 5K, unowned. Should be unowned. What do you want to do with Anderson? And if you like Huang, let me know.
So I haven't even seen who that. I've seen Tyler Rogers listed. DraftKings has John Brabia listed as the probable opener.
We have Huang in the ownership, so
DraftKings has Harlan Garcia as the probable long guy.
I don't think any of this matters.
No, I don't either. I'm just saying I don't even know like the person you're talking about.
Neither do I.
I think the only thing
projects like shit and is unowned, so there's that.
What'd you say?
Projects like shit and is unowned, so and it's the Dodgers.
The only thing I think worth mentioning from a pitching standpoint is that Tyler Anderson is 8,100, 19% strikeout percentage, 4.2 xFIP. I don't think he's any sort of real priority here. He's getting 10% ownership. That seems fine. Like if you land in that price range, I don't think there's a big difference. And right now there isn't in ownership projections either between like him, Joe Ryan, Logan Gilbert, guys like that, where they all just look decent. They don't look like any sort of a priority though.
I wish we had a little bit more time to dig into this, but we are up against it with the NFL behind us. I'm getting to a bunch of the Giants and the Dodgers in this spot. Actually, a little bit more Giants than the Dodgers. Feels very similar to yesterday. I love the park for it. Third in top stack for the Dodgers, 11th in ownership. Giants are a bit worse from a top stack perspective, but better as a value. I like both sides here.
Yeah, I do too. It looks like it's supposed to be 85 again in LA, so favorable hitting conditions, much warmer than normal. I don't like getting to the Giants. I think Tyler Anderson's good, but for similar reasons as last night, you're just getting a cheap team that isn't going to get much ownership, and they are in better hitting conditions than normal. And then on the other side, you're getting the Dodgers against somebody. We don't know who at this point, I guess, but they're a really good offense and not getting a lot of ownership because they are pretty expensive.
Favorite pitchers? Wait 10 seconds.
I mean, Cole if the weather cooperates. Valdez, Bieber. I like Kyle Wright in tournaments.
Okay. Favorite stacks?
Milwaukee, I guess, has to be mentioned. Atlanta, Colorado, St. Louis. Yeah, I'll go with those three.
Go Rockies, everybody. Adam and I will be back at 4:45 for the deeper dive. But for now, hit that like button on your way out the door, or don't, because we're at 69 and that's nice. NFL Strategy Show. First look coming up next. Laffy and Ben breaking down some foosball for you guys. It's going to be a good one. Go watch it. We're out of here. Peace. 11 on the dot. I'll take what I can get.
Don't worry, Josh.